So for years, every other storytelling media has enabled you to sort of see things from multiple points of view. Whether it was the original Rainbow Six novel, as Clancy wrote it, you spent a lot of time with the terrorist group in that, and not when the good guys were around, right? It was just those guys having their plot, and you did to some extent see their point of view. You saw, wow, they're really taking this to a crazy level, but you saw their point of view because you were spending time with them. You also spent time with other people that they captured and
Yes.
used for their scientific experiments to get the Shiva virus that they wanted and stuff. And that's just one example, right? A lot of movies, you'll see both sides. Like we always bring up Heat, the great Michael Mann movie that shows, these two sort of equal adversaries really going head to head, and you sort of see, wow, these two guys are really very alike. And I think it's a little bit of a trap that games have fallen into sometimes is really, getting really into the head of just one character can mean, well, that's all I see of the story, right? And that can be really awesome, and I love games like that too, but it's just really interesting to think, in something that's still a really immersive narrative experience, what if I can also just see it from, a civilian who's caught in the crossfire, as we saw, in the bridge level, and, how are they perceiving the men in black who are running on the bridge?
I think it's really important for you to play from multiple perspectives, and as a player character, you are sometimes encouraged to act a certain way by the main characters. But for us, I think it's important that the players see how similar the terrorist leader and James Wolfe actually are in terms of personality and capability. And one of the questions that we want people to ask is, could I be like that guy? Could I fully embrace what it takes to be a counter-terrorist in the face of new terrorism, if it means being a lot like the terrorists themselves? So I think we are exploring that.
Yeah.
My mandate to the narrative team was, I think you get 4 minutes of non-interactive cutscene material for the entire game. Everything else has to be delivered in smaller pieces interactively.
I mean, I don't even want to use the 4 minutes, really.
Yes, good man.
I think that you don't want to get to that point in the game where you sort of disengage, right? Where you say, oh, it's the cutscene, let me put the controller down on the coffee table and go to the bathroom or something. Or even sit and watch it, but know that I'm perfectly safe, right? Because I can't control anything anymore, so I no longer feel tension. I know, I'm pulled out of the experience. And particularly with the subject matter for this game, obviously I love a lot of games that have fantastic cutscenes in them, and I love that stuff too. But, for us, trying to create this feeling of no one is safe and everything.
And urgency.
If we're watching, like in the demo you saw, that you're sitting at home and you still have control, the player's like, oh, I might, they're not completely disengaged from the experience. So when it goes wrong, they're right there, like, what can I do? Can I, oh, wait, I can get up and try to help, but oh, that didn't work out, and whatever. So that you keep feeling that immersion and tension throughout. It's not sort of like a break in the whole experience. We had a whole bunch of different inspirations, I think, for making, the sort of cinematic approach we've taken to making the gameplay feel cinematic, and certainly there's, a lot of other shooters that have done super cool stuff with keeping you in that perspective, and you still feel like you're in control even though you can't maybe run around the whole area or whatever, and they figure out ways to constrain you but still make that make sense in the fiction of the world. So we do a lot with that, and certainly some of the other more interesting sort of narrative experiment games that are out there have pushed us to add features to this game that you've just never seen in a shooter at all before. So we don't lose sight of the fact that it's a shooter, and that that's the vast majority of it. But I think players will appreciate the variety and all the sort of different experiences you get out of it.
Sure. I think most significantly from Heavy Rain, we were inspired by their use of the controller. The way the player is engaged to manipulate multiple buttons and the sticks at the same time was actually pretty compelling. So in the demo you saw the proxy bomber that's running through the environment is required to hold down the dead man switch button, which really escalates the tension because even as developers, the day that went in the game, everyone was blowing up constantly, and they were like, why am I blowing up? So we've got to hold down the dead man switch. So these kinds of things make it really real when you're not actively shooting and you're in some other perspective. We're definitely working on ways to keep the controller engaging the player. in ways that are atypical for a shooter. So absolutely, Heavy Rain was inspirational that way.
Yeah, we try to avoid that experience where in so many games, well, I can just put down the controller at various times and nothing happens, and I'm fine, and it'll just loop forever in that state. You know, when we're in these high tension things, it's like, no, if you don't move by this time, it's over. And the Dead Man Switch was a great example of that too. Just like in Shadow of the Colossus, it's another example of just that feeling of crawling that creature because you had to hold down the button the whole time you were doing it while doing this other stuff. I mean, that was another inspiration there. So we're really, I think, pulling from a lot of different sources to bring in some of this sort of exotic gameplay that we have. So we always find it useful, when writing. I think writing for games is such a collaborative process that it involves so many different disciplines too. Like you've got your traditional writers, and we've got a guy whose main background is in film, who's working on a lot of stuff and has a lot of really big credits and other projects that he's working on, but is sort of doing this because he loves Rainbow Six so much. And then we also have a writer on the floor with us who's really able to get into details with the level designers and stuff, and we're all in communication back and forth about things. And then we also have the level designers get involved, and obviously art direction, and there's just ideas coming from everywhere. It's not game story creation is really not like the Hollywood model at all, where someone writes a script alone in their room and then throws it over the transom, and some director picks it up and goes off and films it or something like that. We really need to have everybody involved. And the writer, we've had the guy who is is mainly known for screenplays, has been involved the entire time. And he's a great source of sort of a different viewpoint, because he's more used to films but knows a lot about games too. But we'll go back and forth on, he'll have something, well, if this were a movie we'd do it this way, and you say, well, as a game we want to accomplish this, and then we really able to collaborate, I think, in a really productive way to sort of get the best out of both of us, right? He's made us up our game, and I think we've upped his game literacy a lot, and just having him involved the whole time means that when it's like, hey, it's time to write this scene, it's not like, well, what is this scene, this doesn't make sense. You often hear horror stories of writers who are brought in, okay, we're 6 months from ship, I guess we better get somebody to write the script for this thing.
So what you're saying is
none of us can do that.
Everyone working on the narrative has been integrated with the team.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Narrative guys. Oh, wow. We do have very big plans for the soundtrack. We're actually working with 2 composers because we wanted something different. I haven't used any names yet. What I will tell you is we're looking at 2 things for Rainbow. The power of silence. You may have noticed in the playable demo, at a certain point the music just stops because that makes it more real. But of course we're still looking at using music in traditional ways, and we were looking for a composer that I think is more wired into the sort of primal instincts of humans. This guy, I don't know how he does it, but the music goes directly into your nervous system. It doesn't have to go through your brain, per se. And that's probably all I should say.
Yeah, I mean,
until it's officially announced.
I think that with the shifting perspectives, we often talk about ways we can make it feel different when you're playing in these different perspectives, and obviously music is a huge one. And we, obviously we're not talking about who the composers are yet, but had some really interesting meetings with them where we went over the story level by level and what you're doing here, what you're doing there, what the feeling of the group is, and they were just really into trying to capture the emotion in these musical pieces. Again, that won't be playing wall to wall. It's not about overdoing it either. But I think there's lots to be done with that, particularly with trying to show all these different viewpoints.